What about on this?
That one,
It looks pretty good.
I had to go back in and I had to paint in a lot of the, like there was a lot of white left over even after I had
Out here?
tried to, I think it's because I put it in, yeah, I tried to go back in and paint it with like the masking tool
Clippy mask?
thing, painting. Yeah,
The clippy
that.
mask?
Yeah.
Did you use your stamp tool?
Yeah, and I use that too.
Okay.
But I was just trying to get a really clean selection.
And why were you saying you thought that it was fringing or whatever?
I don't think I like, you know, the levels and how you have to
Yes.
like kind of
Okay,
bring
so
the
when I
levels
because I looked
in.
at this before class a
Yeah.
little bit, and like when I look over here,
Yeah.
like right this kind of stuff, that is probably when
Mm-hmm.
you were doing the levels, you went, remember I told you got to be really look at the edges and make sure you're not eating into the edges. Yeah. Did I just freeze?
Oh, Mike, you just cut out. Sorry. Can you say that again?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you did.
remember the levels when you're leveling it out, I'd zoom in on it, make sure I'm not eating up the edges of the selection or of the dark and light. That's what'll create that. So that's why you got to be really dialing in with the levels part of it. You just want to dial it just into, as far as you can get it before it starts damaging any of the edges or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
And
I
then and then go from there, um, and that that's it. But I mean, other than that, I mean, it looks like you get it. It's just a matter of sitting down and doing it and getting really fine tuning with it and all that kind of stuff. Because on a real job, you'd want it to be perfect, right?
right.
And actually, to be honest with you, I look at this all the time. Like if I see a fashion magazine or something with this kind of cover or whatever, I always look at it because I always go, wonder if I can see it, like the selection and stuff. And a lot of times I can actually, you know what I mean? Like a lot of
Oh,
times I'll look at it and go, it's not the cleanest selection there. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
pretty, I mean, it's great, but it's like, it's weird when you really look at these things, you go, there's still some mark of the hand in there a little bit,
Yeah.
Um, and these people, man, when you're talking about Vogue or any of those super high end fashion magazines, man, those people are like Photoshop monsters. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people on that staff that's all they do. You know what I mean? They just take those amazing photographs and make them even more crazy. And I did a job one time. It was interesting. I don't know if you said this, but it was like a CD cover thing, right? I was just doing it for freelance, but the person who gave me the photo, actually it was the singer gave me the photos, right? And she was a pain in the ass, to be honest with you. I actually ended up leaving it because I didn't want to deal with her anymore. Um, uh, she was kind of a spoiled brat, and anyway, so she sent me the photography for that she wanted me to use, for the cover and everything. I go, great, she sends me this photography. It was really great photography. Okay, it had clearly been already edited by the post edited by the photographer. Great job. Okay, great photography, great job. And she goes, well, I think you should do this and this and this to the photography and this and this. And I go, this photography is great. You know what I mean? I go, I don't really need to do anything to this. I go, you're just saying that because everybody thinks you have to post produce everything. And I go, he already did it. You know what I mean? He already did all the post production. I just need to do the layouts and all that. And she kept arguing about it, and I go, and this is, I don't always do this, but this is one where I go, if I touch this guy's photography, I actually feel like I'm disrespecting this because it's already really good. And I don't really want to do that. And I go, and to be honest with you, it's even worse because I just be doing it to do it because I don't even know what I would do to this. It already looks great. You know what I mean? And it was just like, I don't want to, I ended up not, because I didn't quit the job there. And I don't normally ever leave a job, but I was doing this through an agency, and the guy who ran the agency, anyway, was doing something I didn't like. But so I just go, I'm not doing this. You know what I mean? I go do it yourself. And then, by the way, her friend, because this is another reason why I left this job. I start getting into the job, and then she's like, oh, my friend Brian, who's an art director over at Warner Brothers or something, he says, and I'm like, I'm not going to do a design by committee job. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing that. And I go, I don't care what your friend says. And then I looked at his work and I go, his work's not even good. Anyway, when the album came out, I saw it somewhere, and all the art direction was under his name, even though it was all my work. They just switched her friend's name into the art director thing. I'm like, what a joke. I mean, I didn't care about it, but I just thought it was weird for him. Like, I would never take credit for somebody else's work, ever.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
That's my cardinal sin. You know what I mean, Casey?
Yes.
And on the other side of that, though, by the way, I had this. You guys know Santa's Village is up here? Okay, so anyway, I did an NPR story on it when it was all dilapidated and all that. And then I don't know if it was a year later, 2 years, I don't remember. Somebody bought it and decided to revitalize it, right? Which they have. And but anyway, the people that were taking it over called me before the public knew or anything, and they go, "Hey, we'd like you to work on this," right? And I go, "That'd be fun." And so anyway, I go meet her. It was a very weird meeting. Usually, but I'm kind of looking at the property and everything. I'm going, here's what I would do. I would do this. I would do this, and I'm just spitballing stuff. And then anyway, I told her there should be a narrative to tie the whole park together. Does that make sense? And I go, it could be Santa's summer place. He comes here for the summer. And then you need a theme to build around. Does that make sense? A narrative, right? Anyways, I gave her all this stuff, or I just was talking about it. Then she sends me an email and goes, "Hey, I was thinking about like that narrative idea we were talking about. And I came up with this." And she sent me a Word document that was, she'd just written out everything I said. But now she's presenting it to me like, "Oh, I took your ideas and I came up with this." And it's like, no, those are just my ideas. Does that make sense? And then she goes, "But I'm kind of stuck here. Do you have any ideas?" And it's like, you're stuck there because that's where you ran out of what I talked about. You know what I mean? And I didn't do anything with it. It's like, I'm not doing that unless you're paying me. And then she asked me for another meeting, and that meeting was weird to me. And I'm just saying this because this is two different versions of the same thing. So I met her again on the property. They were very secretive and weird, which I didn't like, by the way. And I'd said something about the color palette and how you could do an overlay and you could reduce costs and do a holiday overlay, sort of like they do with the Haunted Mansion, blah, blah, blah. And that you could, anyway, how you structure all this stuff. And so I said something about the color palette and how, and if you did this kind of color palette, you could use it for holiday or summer and get out of just the Santa's Village theme and blah, blah, blah. And I go in, first thing she does, she walks in me and she goes, "You know what? When I was walking out of the house this morning, coming over here," she goes, "I pulled these swatches because I was thinking this would be a really cool color scheme." It was my color scheme. Because she had no background in design, even though she pretended she did. And then she starts, there was a bunch of stuff all of a sudden I'm noticing, like, and then I go, "Oh, you're just picking my brain for free. That's what's going on here." And I told her at that meeting, I cut it off and I go, "I'm not doing this anymore." I go, "If you want information from me, you got to put me on retainer. If you want to do this, if you want to just have me brainstorm with this, whatever I'm going to do, I got to be on retainer. I'm not going to do it." And that was, of course, the last I heard of them. But then when that park opened, man, there were so many things in there that just out of those two conversations they used. Okay. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because that's kind of fair game because I threw it out there. You know what I mean? I threw it out there and, because that's what you do. You just sit there and your brain starts going. And if you think it's a legitimate person, you're just going, "Hey, it's fun. It's fun to throw the ball back and forth, Anyway, it's been open for years now. Okay. Where are you at? Where's Dimitri?
I'm here.
So what do you think?
The hair was hard for me, like the stamping part. I think I had the same problem as Casey with the white stuff.
So let's look at this. Okay, so you got your clipping mask. So I'm gonna stew. So you already have it selected. You got a clipping mask. That's all correct. I'm gonna go to my clone tool. Go a little bigger. I'm gonna grab some of this. Oops. I think I have to be on this layer. I can't remember now. See, you have it right. And you have the clipping mask. All you have to do is come in here and get your stamp tool and start painting this fringe out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's just like really like eaten out, like the hair is getting too chopped up. Like if you zoom in really close, it's all. I think I went too
That's
hard on
that's the
the
same thing we just talked about with Casey's. It's just it usually happens. You go a little too far with the layer or the levels. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you really got, that's why I zoom in early on and I just kind of make sure that I'm not, because if from a distance it'll look fine, but then when you zoom in on it, you'll go, I'm eating into the edges a little bit, and when you chew up the edges a little bit, it's hard to, you know, you're not gonna really be able to fix that. I guess you could fix anything, but so it's just being very careful in the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also, if you notice though, this part of it, the stamp part of it, you have all set up correctly. So you could come in here and paint that. That's going to help it quite a bit if you just come in here and paint all that. So all that you got set up right. It's just the initial selection. Be careful, right?
Aren't you supposed to use darken?
Yes. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, to be honest. But usually, yes. So, yes, I would put it on dark, and let's see if it looks better. Why can I never see these things? Yeah, it does look better. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So that's common when people start doing this, that initial selection, you really got to just keep dialing it in and just really balancing it out. Okay. You could probably use a little bit of the contrast tool a little bit, because it's going to contrast the light and the dark a little bit. So that might help you a little bit. But mostly I'm starting off with the levels tool. And then this one doesn't look like you had any problems, right?
No.
I'm going to do something here though. I don't know if this will work. Hang on. I'm going to try it. Because there's so much of this pink light in here. I'm going to try it on an overlay. We should try like that. What the fuck here? Hang on. Even that helps it a little. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just adding some of that sky color.
Yeah, a little bit of that pink in there. And by the way, it's not, sometimes I can't find an overlay and I have to find a different solution, but the overlays work pretty damn good. That's not bad either. That's not bad. And probably what I would do, no matter which one I picked, I would pull it back like there. You know what I mean? So it's just giving it a little bit of that lighting to pull it into the same environment. Okay. I was just doing a plein air workshop on Saturday. And one of the things we're talking about out there, I think we talked about it here, but it was a very bright day. We were over at La Habra Heights, right? And there's some cars down there and you can see it on the cars, you know. There's a red car down there, that big blue sky up there where the hood, everything is up facing, the hood, all that stuff. You can see that little bit of cool effect. It doesn't go, well, sometimes it goes a little blue, but usually the red will just go a little cooler. Does that make sense? It's the same thing we're talking about here. And the reason I harp on that so much is that that's, again, something I see that's a huge problem with Photoshop, where people are just kind of collaging stuff together. And it's like, that doesn't work. You know what I mean? Just visually, it doesn't work. And it's always going to be, and you can take this to the nth degree, like we've done it a little bit where we can kind of control and create lighting and stuff like that. So sometimes I might sort of find some way, if I feel like, man, I got to get these things into the same lighting a little more, I might push that idea a little bit or create something where I can get a reflected light off something so it'll pull it into that environment, you know, because sometimes I'm looking at it going, it's just not sitting in the environment correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And even that now, it's weird. I didn't look at it now. I've been talking to you guys. I look over here and I go, it's a little too strong. So then I'd pull it down a little more. It's really subtle. Okay. unless you're doing like entertainment art and you're doing this kind of thing, or, you know, illustration or whatever, you know, then you can go pretty crazy with it, right? And if you look back here, by the way, some of this stuff back in here, it looks like right here, a lot of that stuff looks like photo textures to me. Okay. And it looks like this person, this is Feng Zhu or whatever his name is. It looks like he probably started with photos just for a lot of texture, just to give himself a lot of shapes to build into. Okay. Okay, good. Right on. Be honest with you, channel selections is probably one of the hardest things we'll do in here. You know what I mean? Oh, cool. Where are you at?
Right here.
What do you think? That looks good.
I think I just might have
Little
overdone
here,
with the stamp tools.
but you did okay. It looks like you did pretty good. Yeah?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the same thing. If you notice, we get in here, we're eating those edges a little bit. Okay. And if you remember, that's one thing I kept saying is eating edges, because it's really common. Okay. Especially with this sort of really complex selection. Okay. But overall, again, as long as I'm seeing you guys are understanding this tool, which you are, you've got to go in and fine tune it and get it really dialed in. That just takes time and practice. Does that make sense? Right?
Mhm.
Well, that looks great. That looks great. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any comments on that. That looks great. See these sky holes right there where you're punching through the trees? That's really important. Okay. When you're that you're seeing through that like that. It's that kind of complex stuff. That's what sells it. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
All right, great. Hey, where are you at? She here? I see her name. Okay, not getting any feedback.
Oh, I don't think her audio is working. She wrote in the chat, can you hear me?
I can't hear
Okay. She's switching her mics.
her. Okay. Who's this?
Uh,
Who-
that would be me.
What do you think?
Well, first of all, I send you the 72 PPI, so it's not as sharp.
That's all right.
Okay, but eventually I got to using the stamp tool a little bit better. I finally is like, oh, that's how you do that. Okay, and working with some of the levels that I feel that the combination of those two helped me to get it to that particular point.
Yeah.
I was having a big challenge with the background and filling the color, changing the color, stuff like that. So
Here?
simple. Yes.
Okay. In what way?
I filled the color, but if you see layer 4, there's I colored a line because the picture itself, yeah,
What do
it'll
you
be
mean
right
colored
above her.
line?
It'll be right above her. I colored it the same color. So the picture itself gave a border or border right above her. And I just, the heck with this, got the brush, painted it the same color,
It
called it.
looks like, okay, so you're saying there was some line left over from the original selection?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
it might have, because it looks like you changed the proportion of the image,
Okay.
right?
All
So
right.
what it might have done is, because you did that, it sort of had an end where the white background was.
Okay.
So if I was going to do that, I'd probably do it after I made all my selections and sort of selected that out. And then when I drop it into a new image, the layer, it's still the original size and everything. Then I'd probably do that. And if I needed to adjust it after that, I'd have it clipped off so it wouldn't matter.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. I think
Because
so.
if you change that thing, it's got a white, it's, that white ends. Whereas if we're working with it the way it was originally cropped, it doesn't really have an end. It doesn't have a white background where it ends. You know what I mean? And even if I made it bigger and I sampled that white background and filled it behind it to match it, it's probably not going to match exactly perfect because it's probably not 100% white.
Okay.
And then Photoshop, I drop a very subtle value or color, right? Like you might have a really dark value, let's say green, right? It could be any color, but let's say it's a really dark green, it's almost black. If I sample that in Photoshop, it's going to kind of just make it black because it just can't see that subtlety, that there's a little bit of warmth in there, okay, or whatever it is.
All right.
So it's hard to get it to match exactly. So I would just keep it the original crop and work from there.
Work from there.
Does that make sense?
All right. I think I'm understanding.
This looks good. Yeah.
Okay. Same thing. Making sure that through the trees, like you mentioned earlier, that it matches, that you're able to see through it.
Yeah.
And other than that, start working a little bit faster. I've been taking a long time.
Don't worry about that right now.
Okay.
Okay. One thing that you got to understand about whatever you're learning. And I learned this when I was a kid. I was learning how to play guitar. And I kind of, my guitar teacher gave me some song or something. And then I came back next week or whatever it was. And I could play it, but very slowly and probably not quite in rhythm or anything. Right. And I go, I got the muscle memory down. I get it, but I can't play it to speed. He goes, don't worry about that. And he goes, just play it and it'll happen. It'll just happen. And that's something that stuck with me as a learning thing and now in visual art. It's the same thing. I mean, it's knowledge and repetition. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
I think I've said before. And the reason I say knowledge and repetition is there's a lot of conversation because of that Outliers book or whatever it's called, where they talk about 10,000 hours. I might have said this in here, where they talk about 10,000 hours. Oh, you do something for 10,000 hours, you're an expert. Okay, that's total bullshit. Like what I do like about, and I'm sure in the book, whoever wrote that, I've never read it, probably goes more into depth about what I'm talking about. But what I hear in the cultural conversation constantly is 10,000 hours and you're an expert. It's like, that's not true. Okay. It means you spent 10,000 hours at something, probably got better at it. Sometimes you get really better at it. But if you're just doing 10,000 hours of bad habits or bad methodology, then you're just going to get better at bad methodology. It's you know what I mean? There's got to be the knowledge in there and methodology. And then you do repetition. Like you go, okay, I've got good foundational methodology and now I'm going to do it. Right. And with something like Photoshop, the fun thing about it is like, just after this class is over, just give yourself projects and work on things. And I don't care if it's something like you're going to post a picture on social media, take it into Photoshop and clean it up and make it look badass. You know what I mean? Just use that as a way to flex your muscle in it. You know, like I don't put hardly anything on social media that hasn't been edited. You know what I mean? Even if it's just a sketch, I mean, yeah, I just take a picture of the sketch, but then and then I'll just use, well, it depends on what it is. I might just use a Photoshop filter just because it's the same thing I do in Photoshop. I might go I usually push the warmth a little bit, knock out the cool a little bit, brighten it up, get the light and the dark a little leveled out, usually vignette it a little bit. So I clock out the background. Once in a while, I'll tilt shift it. It's all the same stuff I do in Photoshop, okay? Because they have actually really good filters in it. For something that simple, it's fine. If it's a video, it goes into Premiere and I edit it. I edit the color. I might color grade it. I'm obviously adding sound to it. I'm editing the audio. I'm editing everything in it. Even if it's just like a little simple video, I don't like amateurish crap on my feed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's something to think about because what I see a lot of, I was thinking about this a lot yesterday for some reason. There's a lot of young people, students, who are sort of running their Instagram and social media accounts like they're professional. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And I think that's a big problem. I see that all the time where people go illustrator, designer, concept designer, right? I mean, sometimes they have these lists that are insane, right? Producer, you know, and it's like they've never done anything. And then you go to their site, you look at their work, and you're like, this work is completely amateurish. It's pretty much hobby work. And it's weird to see this sort of professional bio up there. And then you look at the work and it's like, hey, you've never done this before as a living or a job or anything. You're clearly not a professional. But they're just, and then they're sort, and then I always tell students, like, you know what they're doing is they're just building negative. They're doing the opposite of what they want to do, which is to get, you know, whatever. They think the career fair is going to knock on their door and all that stuff. They're going to see their Instagram and Disney's going to call them and offer them a job, which is not going to happen. You know what I mean? It's like, I would keep my social media a little more just social media until I felt like my work was where I could start to really highlight my work. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
And
That-
then where I'm starting to think professionally, the other thing I have a problem with is like people who are, there's just so much of this on Instagram where people are presenting themselves as professionals and all sorts of things. And it's really odd to me. And I don't like it also because it sort of dilutes everything when people are looking, you know, because there's art directors or whoever going, you know, cruising Instagram. If they see somebody, they might call them or whatever, right? Now, but I think you're always going to look at it and go, you know, still going to look at it and go, what's the experience of this person? You know, because there's a lot of people who are probably really good at making images and stuff like that, but they don't know how to work in a professional environment. Does that make sense? So they don't know if it, for me, it would be like toy design where somebody goes, hey, you should call this guy up. And I go, why? They don't have any manufacturing experience. They don't have any toy design experience. They don't have any industrial design experience. They don't know anything about the manufacturing process, the trend design process, the marketing process, the production process, the ideation process, the presentation process. They don't know about any of that stuff. All they're doing is making nice drawings. That's not enough. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I think you can actually hurt yourself by doing that on social media, because then, you know, or you're going to have to go in at some point and just wipe all that out and start over. You know what I mean? This one here, I might see if I could pull a little.
Brighter.
No, just a little of that cool in there.
Oh.
That's too much. Maybe same thing. I probably might try an overlay. Just a little tiny bit. I actually think it's fine, but I feel like I want to cool it down just a hair. Okay. Really subtle, because you got so much cool up here,
Yeah.
you know, that you kind of got to speak to it a little bit. Oh, good. You're using layer, adjustment layers. That's good. So let's come back down here again. I want to sample this up here. I'm on another layer. See if I can make this work. I'm going to pull it from over here because oops.
So that was the question I was just going to ask. Can I adjust just a particular area? And I think
Yeah,
you just
I could go like I could do this a bunch of different ways.
yeah,
Hang on. I could go.
because it's like a left to right or a right to left.
Yeah, because you got a lot of light over there, so I might kind of try and keep it over here,
Man, that's cool. Okay.
and then go maybe over that way a little bit. Oops. Maybe, and I'll have to blur this a little bit. So let's go. Well, let's just see if we can even find something first. Blue sometimes can be a little tricky. Just want to cool it off just a hair.
Yeah.
Like even that's not bad. But I think I might be able to adjust that one. That one's not too bad. So obviously I don't want that much of it. I'm going to blur this. I'm going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So I don't want a hard edge. I'm going to blur it out quite a bit. That's fine.
Blur. Okay.
And then I'm going to go, because I don't want a hard edge. And then I'm going to go, this is just way too much. Oh, wait a minute. What did I just do? Oh, that's fine. It's way too much. So I'm going to come up here and
Wow, that's
just knock it down a hair. And I'd probably like, that's probably fine. because I'm getting a lot of light over here to the right.
Mhm.
And I just want to cool this off. I don't want it to get too blue. I just want to sort of knock it down and desaturate it a little bit.
Okay.
Probably do it with my desaturating tool, but the problem desaturating it is I'm not getting any color in it.
Okay.
Okay.
I felt with these
Even that looks a little strong to me. I'd probably pull it back some more. Yeah, just like that. Really subtle. Okay.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
And then, by the way, we probably talked about this in here, but like what you're seeing now, and it's new, sort of, well, newish, new in the digital because of the digital thing, obviously. What you're seeing all the time now isn't what I used to like. Look, they've always airbrushed images and stuff, but there was a limit to that because you were literally airbrushing and the stuff. Now there's no limits, obviously. So what you're seeing now is this thing that lives between photography and illustration. Does that make sense? Most of the images you see now are somewhere between photography and illustration. They're not really straight photography at all anymore. And they're not 100% illustration. They live somewhere in the middle. I think art centers changed the name of their photography department to like imaging and something. I think it might just be called imaging or something, which was kind of smart because it's not really just straight photography anymore. Does that make sense? And you got to be careful with that because like if you're, depending on what kind of work you're doing, there could be an ethical issue there, right? If you're a photojournalist, you can't edit your photos like that. You got to keep it. What you're doing is capturing moments there. And those people are amazing at that. Okay. I mean, unbelievable. And they, I'm sure they go in and Lightroom them, and do the normal stuff, contrast, things like that, make them presentable for publication, but they have a very much, they have a line they can't cross. Like they start going and oversaturating skies and making it look almost, Photoshoppy, that you can't do that. You know what I mean? Because they're documenting things. Okay, where are you at?
Oh, I'm here.
What do you think?
I think like I messed up on the bottom right part of the hair with the stem tool.
Down here?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's getting a little hard edge right there. You see it?
yeah.
Now there might be some, let's see. Sorry, hang on. It's kind of hard to see because you got a dark background. Nah, it's not there. So you're just getting a little bit same. It's the same thing we've been talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then it looks like you could have picked up some of these finer things in here and that would have helped. It's a really dark background, so it's hard to see it. Yeah, it's just a hard edge. Yeah, so you just got to be careful when you're doing it. It's usually in the initial selection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Like in your levels, it's usually there. Okay, and normally you got to spend quite a bit of time finessing that. Okay.
Okay.
And by the way, the learning curve on Photoshop is like anything else. It's never ending. Okay. You're always going to stumble and find somebody that's doing this same thing, only they add some little thing to it. And you go, wow, that's a great trick. You know what I mean? Or technique, right? I don't like tricks. Like up in here, it looks pretty good. We just want to avoid those hard edges and things like that. And then this kind of stuff, this fringing right here, that's probably just going back in and, I don't know what that is. That's weird. Huh, that's weird. I don't know what's causing that. Oh, that's why I'm on the
You're on the
wrong.
wrong layer.
Thank you very much. There it is. Oops. Oh, that's not bad. Just coming in here and getting this stuff knocked in. Actually, it helps it a lot because that's partly why it's reading like hard edges, is I'm not seeing all those little hairs in there. So part of it's that. Like, and in here, it's not too bad. That's pretty good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So I think a lot of it, yours, is just looks like it's going in and kind of cleaning it up with your, it's not a bad selection. It's a few things that are too hard edge like that, but. And next week, I'm going to get really into brushes, okay? Reactive brushes, just all sorts of brushes, okay? So I was going to say something about something. Oh, by the way, I'll try and do it today. I'll try and give you guys my fonts, okay, for this poster project, so you have some fonts. Again, I know that I shouldn't be doing that. It's a copyright thing. You guys got to have some decent fonts. Does that make sense? And by the way, don't do what people, I know this takes a little bit of practice and you got to understand it, but people, sometimes they do really great work and then they do horrible type choices. Okay. Start fine tuning your type choice. Even if you're not a graphic designer or whatever, you need to know that. You need to have a sensitivity to type, because even if you're doing a presentation for whatever, you don't want to go up there and you got papyrus up there on your on your presentation. Okay. And if you're a graphic designer, you know what I'm talking about. Like I was like a lot of other people when I finally saw Avatar, I'm like, I can't believe they use papyrus for the subtitles in this. And then I went and looked it up online and there was this whole community of people who were like, what the hell, you know? Like, who would do that? Okay, and this one, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's good. Yeah?
Yeah.
You didn't look like you had any problem with that, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Any questions?
No, no questions.
Okay, great. We're moving along pretty good. We should be fine with everything we got to cover. Okay, that was. Okay, where are you at?
Oh, that's me
Huh?
here. So for that one, I think I did okay. I had more trouble with the hair one.
Well, that's normal.
Yeah, the ends of the hair, I think for some
Same
reason,
thing.
yeah, the same thing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, for some reason, I couldn't use the clone or the stamp tool. So I did the brush instead, and it just made it look very washed out and like there was no texture. And
Yeah, that's kind of why the stamp tool works nice. Hang on a second.
yeah, that's what I realized
Let's
afterwards.
go here. We're on darken. We'll go a little bigger.
Mhm.
Trying to find a spot that's fringy. It looks like you actually covered a lot of it.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Okay. Because I'm not building anything in here. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, it's working.
Just, yeah, the stamp tool would have worked a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, it is working in here. Okay.
Mhm.
It looks like the reason it's not covering a lot is because it looks like you already painted it out, so it doesn't really have anything to add to it.
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, it looks like you get it. It's just the stamp tool thing, right?
Yeah, I just need to practice with the stamp tool.
Yeah, and just the same thing here. I mean, this is pretty good, but it's starting to eat up right in there. You see it?
Yeah.
It's starting to chew up that edge a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. But overall, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm mainly concerned with is that you guys understand a couple of things, which is, I mean, obviously how it works, but obviously kind of understand what Photoshop is doing. Does that make sense? Because if you don't understand each individual tool we're doing, you don't know how to use them together. Does that make sense? And you don't know when to use it for what. And by the way, this channel selection stuff, there's a million things you can do with it. Okay. I mean, I've said this a million times. I've been using Photoshop for God knows how long. Okay. And I probably scratched the surface of it. It's such a deep program. Does that make sense? It's just endless. Okay. The only people, I think I've said this, that I've met who like know every bit of Photoshop from one end to the other are like Adobe certified people. Right. And it's really weird because most of those people aren't really good designers or anything, but they know this program like an engineer backwards to forwards, which is really weird to me. It's just a lot of stuff to learn, man. And that's probably why you got to get it certified by Adobe, because that's who they want teaching it. You know, somebody who just knows the crap out of it. You know what I mean? But I'd also argue if you're not, if the whoever's instructing you in it isn't bringing a little bit of the reality of using the program and the artistry of using the program, that can sort of be empty knowledge. Does that make sense? And again, the way I sort of learned Photoshop was sort of like that. It was a long time ago. I mean, it was when it was like, I don't know what version was, but it was early on, pretty early on. And, it was, that's how it was taught. It was taught very sort of step-by-step-y. And I was like, I'm not understanding any of this stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and do the steps, but I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, I don't understand what is this channel shit? We weren't even talking about that yet, but stuff like that. I was just going, I don't get what this is. You know what I mean? This is weird. Because if you notice, it gets intuitive like anything else. But when you first start this, to me, Photoshop is not intuitive. You know what I mean? I don't think it's intuitive at all. I mean, it gets intuitive, but it isn't at first, at least to me. Okay, who's this? Oh, Mary Baker. What do you think?
I think that watching your video
Uh-huh.
after the homework helps a lot.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you darkened it up here, yeah?
Yeah.
I might just see if I can back that off a little. Like that. Just get a little of that light in there. So I want to see a little texture. And then let's see this one. It's pretty good. Same thing. See it?
Yeah.
A little bit of that chewing up in there. So that's the real dance that you got to do in the beginning. Okay. And really through the whole thing, really. And it's irritating sometimes because you're looking at a normal thing, you go, wow, it looks really good. And you zoom in, you go, you know?
Yeah.
Like this light right here on her. And I know that light, I think this reflected light, that's one of those things where, again, I'd probably come in here. Why does my brush always disappear? Get this, maybe some of this. I'm gonna really blur this. That's weird. Where did my blur filter go? Come on. And just cool that little light off a little bit, right?
Okay.
Because this is a pretty strong blue, and then it's
Yeah.
hitting here. And I'm sampling it from down here. I just want it to just cool off a little bit. Okay, so it's the same thing. This looks good. It looks like everybody's understanding it, which is my main thing.
Yeah. I think I understand how to do it now.
But all of it's going to take practice, you know. And sometimes, like we're going to do next week when we do reactive brushes, I'm going to show you once in a while I find a really good video I'll use in class, because I usually, when I go to make a video tutorial for a class, especially for this kind of class, the more digital stuff, I'll go and check out and see if I can find anything that's good. And once in a while I'll find one and go, that's perfect. And I don't have to make one. Does that make sense? I don't do that to cut anything down, because I have no problem doing all that. But sometimes I just find one's perfect and I go, that's perfect. Okay. I think I found 2 in this class. So one of them, when we start doing fur stuff next week, I want to show you how to make a reactive brush that does fur and things like that. I'll show you like about a 15-minute video or 10-minute video of somebody. First, I'll show you the process, and then I'll show you how this guy uses it. Does that make sense? So it's really just to see how somebody uses it in a very professional, complex way. Okay. I think I've only got 2 that I found that work for that. Where's Melissa?
I'm right here.
A lot of fringing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you go in here? Because I don't see any clipping mask.
How did you do the clipping mask?
So in
Try
this
that-
case, you can just go add a layer,
Mhm.
right click, create clipping mask, and there it is.
Okay.
And now when I go in and I stamp it, and by the way, some of you guys said you use the paint tool. Sometimes that works too. Okay. You know, most of these things, there we go.
Oh,
So it's going to lock it into just what your selection is. So you just need to do that.
that's way easy. I thought you had to like, zoom in really close and then.
Not at this point. If you made a good selection, you've already done that work. Okay. So this part is fairly simple because hopefully you've done your selection nice. Like that little part looks like it didn't get selected. Let's look. It's not too bad. You got a little of that going on, but it's not too bad. And sometimes what fixes it is just doing this. This one's pretty good. It's not bad. There's not a lot. Like here, it's getting a little ratty right in there. So anyway, that's early on in your selection. If you make a great selection, the clipping mask will contain it. And by the way, you could do this if you made like, even if you were just doing, actually next week, I'm not going to go into brushes. I'm going to go into some color stuff and then I'll go into brushes, but it'll probably all be next week. Okay. Cause we're going to do an exercise on like comic book coloring and then color. Anyway, I'll figure it out next week. Anyway, you just need to go in and make a clipping mask and do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And where's my other one?
I thought we only had to turn in one.
Did you already
but
turn in the other one before?
Mhm.
Oh, then you're fine.
Okay.
As long as I get them before the due date, it's fine. Where's Tom at?
I'm here.
Same thing, a little bit of that. So if you notice, this is what is in every class. There's certain things that everybody will sort of have problems with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But looks pretty good overall. Do you have any questions on it?
No.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with it. It looks like you know what you're doing. Okay, cool. Very, very African savanna, right?
Yeah.
You need some of those tabletop trees in there. Which, by the way, I'll show you how to do next week. Or maybe, no, this week we got to do this poster thing. Okay, no questions. You're good, yeah?
Yeah.
So I want to show you guys this thing that popped up. Okay, so there was this thing that I saw a while back. It was a sort of a researchy technology. I think it came out of some research department of some college or whatever. And I don't know exactly what it was for initially, but what they started using it for, I saw it on Gurney's site, is to track how the eye flows across visual information. Okay. It was really interesting. And so then they started applying it to like famous paintings, I think, and going, will people's eye follow it the way that we've always traditionally looked at the way the artist intended the composition to work? Does that make sense? And I always say, I probably said it in here, when you're creating any kind of art, you want to control where their eye goes. You want a strong first, second, third read, right? Unless you don't have that many elements or whatever, but basically a first, second, third read, you want to control that, okay? So they use this technology and they can track where the eye goes and how it reads the information. I think most of them did fall where they sort of flowed the way the artist intended. So I was like, well, that's interesting. They're just taking that technology and kind of playing with it with this. But then this morning, this popped up. Hang on. Find it here. And this also falls into the category of what I'm always talking about, which with people are going into this industry now, how different it is from when I was in it actively. We were just talking about this out this weekend, and I think I've said it in here, but like if you look at the way things used to change in my timeline, my lifetime, it was very long stretches before anything would change. Okay. and I might have said it in here before, we were talking about this weekend. I go, look how long markers survived. They're still surviving, but they're not the biggest, you know, now it's mostly digital, right? That probably went on for 40 years, 50 years. I don't even know, but it's a long time. Okay. And then, you know, digital comes along. That's basically what wiped it out or whatever. But that was sort of the timeline. Like maybe every decade something would change, maybe every 2 decades, you know, it was a long time. And now that's all completely different where the world just everything's moving so fast. Does that make sense? And then you've got to constantly keep your skills updated if you're going into the industry right now, right? So this popped up. I'll just play a little bit of it.
It's easy to compare the scores. Leverages AI simulating first glance vision. Understanding how your design performs at first glance is key to predicting what engages an audience and what is distracting. You can test, compare, perfect, and present your work with confidence. Today, I'll show you how to integrate testing into the design process using Ogtree. I want viewers to notice the brand, the shop now call to action, know that these are dog treats, and that they are organic, in that order. I am going to use Vaz to see how this design delivers that.
I won't go through the whole thing, but I want you to see this.
And decide which design to refine further. First, I click the Vaz icon here to open the plugin panel. Then select the content type. Vaz uses tailored algorithms based on the way our brains typically view different types of media. So selecting the content type is important for the most accurate results. To get the most information I can from Vaz, I like to get a focused analysis of the areas I know are important. For this, click Areas of Interest and use the rectangle shape tool to mark key areas. After, select all the rectangle layers and then convert to targets. When converted, the areas of interest are surrounded by a green box. It's that easy. Now click Analyze. Vaz's science-based algorithms are now running a simulation of human first-glance vision. Very quickly, it will generate 5 cool reports filled with data on what will likely be seen in the first 3 to 5 seconds. Let's take a look at 2 of their...
You get the point? Now, what's interesting about that, it's interesting how these things pop into the design field. And just, when I was looking at that technology, I don't know, a couple of years ago, whenever I saw it, and it wasn't software or anything, now somebody's integrated it into design software, right? And that's a plugin that goes into Photoshop, goes into various programs. I think mostly Adobe programs, okay? It's interesting, you know what I mean? There's a part of me that's resistant to that. And then there's a part of me goes, well, if it's accurate, why not, right? The other thing that I see with this is, you know what's going to happen? Depending on, if you're a low-level graphic designer somewhere, okay, or you don't have power, I shouldn't say low-level, but you don't have much power, you know what's going to happen with that software? You're going to do a design, they're going to do a design, and then marketing people are going to want those reports that she just talked about. It shows these 5 analytical reports, and they're going to go, and they're going to say all this nonsense because I don't care how good that software is. There needs to be a human involved in it who understands design. Okay. And I guarantee you that's what's going to happen with it. You know what I mean? Because marketing people love that sort of formulaic thing. And I don't think if that works, you know, if it's really saying, you know, figured out the brain algorithm of how people see, I think there's a certain part of that that's interesting and is probably useful. And I think there's a certain part of that where I go, I don't need to do this all the time. I get my first, second, third read. You know what I mean? Like that product she was just showing, and I'm sure it was designed to be a very simple presentation, but you're sort of going, well, you got a big headline there. Of course your eye is going to go there first. The only thing and then when she analyzed it, the little thing up on top actually looked like it got more of a first read, but it's because it's really contrasty. Like her big type isn't very contrasty. And then this up here, super contrasty. Your eye tends to go to the highest level of contrast. Okay. Anyway, so, you know, it's another thing that's out there, you know, and it looks like a very simple program to use. It's probably going to be integrated because I'm guessing marketing people are going to absolutely love that program, right? Because they always want to automate, and if they can get rid of artists, they love getting rid of artists, you know, because they think they're artists. They think they're designers. Does that make sense? And by the way, so does everybody else who can inject themselves into that process. Like a president or a vice president or something like that. Okay, so let's look at, okay, so tomorrow I want to start seeing thumbnails, yes? Don't give me one, give me at least 3, okay? Because go ahead.
Drawn out?
Yeah, just little simple, like I was talking about last time where it's like,
okay. Thumbnails tomorrow.
You want a JPEG or PMG?
Here's what I would do. If you can either do them on paper, and I mean, these things should be small. It's called thumbnails for a reason. They can either be on paper or, if you have a tablet or your iPad or whatever, I don't care, whatever you like to draw on. If you do it on paper, just take an iPhone photo or, cell phone photo of it. As long as I can see it, I'm fine. Does that make sense? I just need to see it. All this is for conversation. Okay. Also, you don't have to be some great drafts person, or a lot of times people think you want some, I don't. Okay. I just want something for discussion. So again, it could just be, that's weird. By the way, my computer, for some reason, I told you guys this, but it's totally bogging down in Premiere. So today, if it does that, I'm going to jump over to my other machine and see if that's faster, So I could have my ratio, approximate ratio. I can go, I'm going to have a cowboy here. Gun, you don't even have to put all this stuff. I don't care. That's my cowboy. I'm going to have other cowboys, right? I think I did this last week. Riding towards the viewer. There's the horizon line. There's the thing. It's just going to fade into that. Maybe I've got clouds up here, sunsetty. I'm going to have my type right here. So now I have to refigure that out. So always think about your type. Okay. That's another reason why you do this, because what happens a lot is people just start going into Photoshop and they start making something really cool and they go, where's your type going to go? And they're like, oh crap. And it screws up their whole design, right? It could be, where did this go? Hang on. Oh, there it is. That could be one. You could do it, and here's the thing with thumbnails. What they're really for is just to sit here and design without any thought to like, oh, I got to make a good drawing. I got to do this. I got to do that. And also what they teach you is not to be precious. Does that make sense? And what that means is if I sit here and I start doing one, I go, that kind of sucks. I just move on to another one. Because each one really you shouldn't spend over 5 minutes on. Okay. They're about iterating. Does that make sense? And one of the things I always say about thumbnailing is almost every time I start a project, I throw down a thumbnail. Maybe in the first 3, I go, ooh, I think that's it. But then I just keep going. Okay. Usually by the time I get to like the 25th thumbnail or whatever, I'm looking at that one and going, why did I even think that was a good idea? Does that make sense? Because you can't go a first or second hit is the one, and it might be, but usually it's not. Okay. And you don't know. And it's just that thing you hear in basic design, compare and contrast and all that. If I don't have anything to compare and contrast that first idea to, how do I know it's a good idea? Right. And even if I really am strongly believing it's a good idea, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going and keep going. And then, I might make a weird mark. That's why I like drawing traditionally, like with a pen or something. I might make a weird mark and go, oh, that's kind of a cool shape. What can I put there? Oh, I can put a guy on horseback, like riding towards the thing. And then wait a minute. Then I can curve that whole idea up and put this and then this and then this and this. And I start just, exploring all these ideas. I'm not worried about making a great drawing, any of that stuff. It's about iterating ideas. Does that make sense? And there's nothing worse than if you ask somebody for ideas in a, you know, in a job, and you go back and they got 2 ideas. You're just like, are you kidding me? 2 ideas? Really? Right? I've had people do that, and you're like, this is ridiculous. You gave me 2 ideas, dude. What are you doing? I'm working on this all day and you gave me 2 ideas, right? Or I've had people give me 25 amazing ideas. Okay. Like literally almost all of them are great. Okay. So, you know, I might go, here's my big hero headshot. Got a face here, and then there's the things here, you know, and these heads, if you go, these are going to be the heads of the other people or whatever. But again, what I usually do is I try and start this with type, you know, and I'll just do, hang it, I got to reset my, my Wacom does this every now and then. Oops, wrong one. Oh, here we go. Nope, that's not what I want. Calibration. Calibrate.
So Mike, should we think about 4 elements, a couple images to balance against a couple pieces of text, and kind of interplay between those 2 and have different layouts?
What I do is I
in the
always
concept?
just put something up here for type. If there's going to be any type down here, I'll put that. And then I work with this space. Does that make sense? Because I want to write anything you're working on, make sure that the elements that are going to be there, that have to be there, whether it's type or copy or, you know, headline, you know, in movie posters, always have that block down at the bottom. You know, it says directed by, produced by, starring so-and-so, special guest appearance by, all that stuff down there. So if it was a real movie poster, you'd have that block of type right here. And then I go, okay, I'm working in here. And yes, I want to have multiple elements in there. Okay. What I always am really obsessed with, whether, you know, especially with just illustration, but even this kind of thing too, is I just like to set up the lighting in an interesting way. You know what I mean? I like to go, how can I use the lighting to integrate everything together? Because we're just going to use assets here. Okay. So what we want to do is figure out what we want to do. Then you'll go out and find the assets. Okay. Google, whatever. Right. But when you're doing the search on Google, make sure you're always on a large size. Does that make sense? That you're searching large images, right? We're not going to make this huge. You can do it, and you should do it 72 DPI. You don't need to be 300 for this. So a lot of times, and I'll show you kind of this when I show you the comic coloring thing, how I start to approach when I'm painting lighting and stuff like that. By the way, again, if you're not an illustrator, you don't need to be, when I start talking about painting or color or illustration, I have it set up where you don't have to do that. Does that make sense? And I also, if you're an illustrator or something, you go, I want to use this drawing, as long as I approve it, it's fine. But the just as a heads up, what tends to happen is I'm always talking about what a finished paintable drawing is. And most students don't really know what that is. Does that make sense? So they come in, they go, I want to use this drawing. I go, this drawing's not even close to finished. Okay. You can't go in with something that hasn't been completely designed and start to paint it. It doesn't make sense. Now there's certain, if you're doing it like I have for a long time, but I wouldn't even do this on an illustration project, but like if I'm painting or something, yeah, I'll go in and find certain things in the paint, right? But I've been doing it for a long time. Okay. And if I'm doing it for an illustration, I'm probably not going to do that. Or even a painting. I'm going to work it out a little bit. And that doesn't mean that everything's like a hard line and all that stuff. It just means that every element is worked out. Does that make sense? You know, and it's paintable. Because if you take an unfinished drawing, and I've seen this, by the way, I was in a guy's studio. He was one of those neo-realist guys that are trying to paint like 17th century, I don't even know what era it is, like Italian realist guys. So they're painting like those, this is such a weird thing to me. They're painting like those still lifes of like a pot and a violin, and they're very Italian-y. And anyway, so I was in this guy's studio. I used to do life drawing groups in there. And so he had all his work up in there, and he had these paintings in there that were that kind of thing, right? Where you could tell he spent a lot of time on the painting, but the drawings underneath him sucked. Okay, they weren't good. So you're sitting around looking at it going, why would you spend all that time painting to that level of finish and the drawing doesn't work? You know what I mean? And it just looks like Amateurville. You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't care how long you spent on that, dude. I don't care how long you rendered it. the drawing sucks. So it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? You better get that damn drawing figured out before you start doing, especially something like that. You know what I mean?
So Mike, when you mean that, you're actually talking about the composition of the drawing.
No, yeah, some of it's composition, but it was more about problems with the drawing.
You mean like proportion?
Proportion, wasn't very well designed. To me, all of it falls under design. Maybe things are a little just off. Like maybe the perspective on that violin as it's going back is just a little off. It's stuff like that. Just drawing problems. You know, maybe that ellipse is wrong. You know what I mean? Well, wait a minute. My eye's up here, but that ellipse is saying I'm here. You know what I mean? It's just weird stuff like that. Or bad, not great brushwork. That's another thing. But it's just like, it's that old phrase, you're putting lipstick on a pig. You know what I mean? It's a bad drawing. No matter what you do to it, it's a bad drawing. So at the bottom of this, if you're an illustrator or something like that, or an entertainment design person, whatever, or a graphic designer, you know, you might not be drawing it, but everything's got to be balanced the same way, right? So we're not really that different. If you don't, you know, get all that stuff nailed down, it doesn't work. And it's part of the reason I like to do very finished paintings in my sketchbook, because it forces me to do that all the time, forces me to go get that drawing all right, and then go in and, you know, do a very finished sort of illustration-y thing with it. And a lot of times I just do that to keep my eyes fine-tuned. Does that make sense? And going out and drawing from life, I do that for that reason, going out and painting from life, all that stuff, okay? That thing, if you're an illustrator or anything that involves drawing, get in a sketchbook and go out and draw from life. Does that make sense? So then you'll do a ton of mileage. Otherwise you won't. If you're sitting around your studio, I'm going to do mileage, you're not going to do it. You're going to spend too much time on every drawing. You're not going to know what to draw. You're going to have to figure out what to draw. You're going to have to pull reference. You're just going to make a big stupid thing out of it, because that's just the nature of being in the studio. Whereas if you go out, you'll do 10 drawings, 15 drawings, you know, drawing people. Maybe you draw 15 people on every page, you know, just like little quick thing, you know, whatever. But that's fine tuning your eyes. And then it's also fine tuning your proportion. It's fine tuning your editing. It's fine tuning your design. It's fine tuning your staging. You're doing all sorts of things in one fell swoop. Does that make sense? Okay. Because I'm just a big believer in fundamentals. Okay. And I don't think it's bad for graphic designers to do the same thing. You know, just go in and do a very simplified version of it, you know, where you start learning how to really simplify things so you can thumbnail. And if you can do that, you have an advantage over other designers, I think. Because if I see a graphic design portfolio and one gives me a bunch of bitchin' thumbnails and process, and then I went to this, and here's my finish, and you show me all that process, you're in. Because if nobody else is showing me that, I'm hiring you. Because you're showing me process and how you think, and I can also look at that and go, you're going to be fast, because you know how to throw down ideas. Does that make sense? So these can just be really simple. Does that make sense? I just want to know placement and idea. That's it. Does that make sense?
Okay. All right.
And they can be on paper. You don't have to get a ruler or anything to do the borders. You just go, it's just all about starting to learn how to get ideas to flow down on paper or whatever, you know, however you're doing it. The problem for me is I've had, you see this all the time, where people are so computer-based that they start going, they start just going and pulling images and start throwing something together. And you're like, these aren't your ideas. Your ideas are being driven by the assets you're finding. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, you know, the next step of this, if I'm going to do this, I might just go, let's try this real quick. There's another thing I love Photoshop for. Let's see if it's here. I don't want this. Ah, here we go. Let's take this guy. So I might go. What did I just do? Sorry, hang on, guys. My computer's just doing some weird stuff. Oh, here it is. I still can't figure out why my computer's going so slow. Okay, so let's take that. I'm going to see if I can use my landscape thing. I don't know if I can, but we'll see. I didn't keep my landscape thing. Oh, well, I'll use this. We'll just use a bunch of crap. So, you know, if I do, sometimes with this kind of thing, see if I have anything else. Let's grab this. Oh, maybe this won't do it. And I might, so if I get an idea, then I might come in here and go, use my object selection tool. Oops, wrong one. And I'll bash it. Does that make sense? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? I'm going to show you. Hang on. Where's my object selection tool?
Photo bashing is where you just quickly like throw images together, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, where the hell is my object selection tool? Hang on. I'm going to do something I never do. Hang on. This is really annoying. See all these extra tools down here? It's because I have to set this up again, which I really don't dig at all. And ever since they changed this, it makes it a hassle. You should be right here. That's what I'm not understanding.
With the lasso?
No, I'm looking for my object selection tool. And it's nowhere. Where is it? It's not in there. It's not in there. That's weird. And then it should be down here because it says, okay, that's really irritating. Wait a minute. Let me see something. Oh, it's in 3D. See how my workspace has changed for some reason? I don't want 3D. I want Mike. There it is. Okay, so now I'm going to take this guy. We'll jump back over here. I'm going to make this a little taller. I'm not going to give you a size, you guys, but don't go below letter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so stay above 8 and what was it? 8 by 11 and a half. 8.5 by 11.
Yeah, but I'm not going to give you a size. Now I lost some, it looks like I lost some of that up there, but who cares? For this, I don't care. So sometimes because all I'm going to do is bash it. And I do this for all kinds of stuff. I even, I've done it for, just all kinds of stuff. Can very quickly bash stuff together. And let's see if I can do this. I'm not sure if this will work.
Mike?
Yeah.
Are thumbnails mini reference sheets?
No, your reference sheets would be something where I grab a bunch of stuff and go, I want it to look like this.
Okay, very well.
Or a style board. Like, that's interesting because one thing it kind of, I know this is all stuff that just sounds petty, but I can't help it.
This is a more specific idea.
Well, now I'm going, I would have done a thumbnail.
Okay.
And I would have been like, I want to do something like this. And then I'm just going to flatten this back here because I don't really, oops, what happened? I'm going to flatten all this. And I wouldn't do that normally. I'm just doing it for speed right now. There we go. And then I might go back in and go, okay, I'm going to have to obviously put some color to him. Does that make sense? Or some of because there's such a lit environment. So there's a couple of things I could play with here. Now I could go in and go, well, let's also do this. I have to go got to think about my type. So I'm going to go, I like to place type in at least for placement. And I'll start to think about what the flavor of the type's going to be. I want to use maybe this one called Parlor. Let's see. By the way, my type I'm going to give you is type I've stolen from a lot of places I've worked. Okay. So every time I go in there, everybody does this. Every time you go in there, you go, everywhere you go, if you're going on their machines, they've got all this type you don't have, right? It's usually good type. So I just immediately, first day I'm there, I go, bink, I throw it all in a folder and I take it home and I put it on an external drive, right? And then a lot of it I bought. Okay. So you're going to get a lot of things I bought and a lot of things I've accumulated. Okay. Everybody does it. Let's try Parlor. This one, let's try that one. It's got a little bit of a rustic vibe, a little bit. See what I mean? It's got that little bit of distress on the bottom of it. Does that make sense? What's the matter, Casey?
I'm just laughing about what you said about the type.
Well, everybody does it.
I know, but it just makes me laugh.
Not that
Sorry,
that
keep
makes it
going.
right, by the way.
No, I know.
Well, I know, but it's like, what are you going to do? So this guy's too small. So I would go, I don't know if I can use that type. I don't really want him that small. I want him a little more prominent. So maybe I'll go back to, I don't know. Let's try wheat. Oops. What happened? Oh, and here's another thing. And let's just do this. This might be better. Let's go back to Parlor. I kind of like wheat, actually. So let's just go. I'm going to put this behind him. And I'd have to make sure it was readable. Okay. So just for now, I'm going to leave it. And then I'd have to figure out, you know, what color I want to use and all that. But maybe let's try Parlor again now. I just figured that out. I don't want to go with the obvious where it looks like a that wanted poster kind of thing. I don't want to do that. Okay. And then this guy, let's just try this for the hell of it. Let's go. Let's grab an eyedropper and just grab sort of an overall. I want to try that. Then I'm going to go, I'm just going to make a copy of this guy because I might go, okay, right now he's not fitting in this lighting wise, correct? So I might go Command U for my hue saturation. And then again, this little colorize thing will just give him that foreground color, which I kind of like, right? So now it's monochromatically putting him in that image, okay? So I'm just going to use a design tool, and then I might go, can I saturate it a little bit? Kind of like that. I might go, can I get, and then another thing. So now I'm going, okay, he's heavily backlit. Maybe I'll do that trick, this again. I'm going to push him back a little. You know, and by the way, a type, if it's a word like cowboy or something you totally know, you can obscure it a little more, but I still got to make sure that you read it. Does that make sense? Now, whatever the title of this, if this was a movie, they'd be like, that title's got to be super readable. We're not dicking around with this. Does that make sense? But I'm playing around with it a little bit. So I'm going to take this guy. And now if I didn't do this, and the other thing I might explore is instead of making him monochromatic to fit the environment, I might just start lighting him a little bit. Okay. We'll talk about that in a minute, but, I'm going to go here. Now I got them selected. I'm going to make a new layer. We talked about this before. Only I'm going to use and I'm going to go to my grayscale. I'm going to pick that. And this stuff is just like thumbnailing. I'm just trying stuff. Does that make sense? Okay, now I've got that. And I'm going to go on that layer. I'm going to go edit, transform, flip vertical. Only the difference now is I'm going to come in here and go edit, transform, perspective, and really give it that sort of widening out long shadow thing, right? And then that makes my brain go, what if I put 2 or 3 guys, made them smaller and they had the shadow casting out, right? Or what if that shadow becomes another shape that has something to do with the story? Let's look at that. Not dark enough. Now I'd have to tweak that. I don't like that shape that much, but I would tweak it. Okay. And then I also think it needs to go down a little bit. But I want to ground him. Does that make sense? And then I might go. I don't know where I go. Maybe I'm going to go make this back here a little more dramatic. Let's see if that even works. And I'd have to design these. I'm just going to half-ass it. And by the way, I'd also might do this if I was, you know, comping it for a client, right? I might just do something really fast like this. Like if they already saw a sketch and they go, I kind of like that. Then I might go, well, you know, here's a kind of comped up version of it. Because I don't want, this is what happens a lot is you don't want to, a lot of times people act like they're savvy about drawings and things like that. And then when you sort of start executing, they go, whoa, that's not what I think. And you're going, yeah, you did. Here's the sketch. But they don't know how to you know what I mean? It depends on who you're working with. And if you're working with a non-creative, you want to make sure that you're doing stuff to all along the way. You're going, this is what I'm doing. And you just keep going along the way because sometimes there's a huge disconnect. Okay, does that make sense? And you'll take it for granted because as a creative person and a visual thinker, you go, well, everybody does this. They don't. Okay, they don't have that ability. It's really mind-blowing how much they don't. Okay, which makes you valuable, by the way.
So Mike, would you do a couple, besides the thumbnails and these rough ups, would you do them in different colors, like
Oh,
different?
yeah, I do all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
You know, I'm going to actually try something different here. Let's go. Let's see what I can get here. And again, one of the things I like that I try to do with everything is make it my collaborator. So one thing I do like about these kind of things is I'm trying all these things. I don't know exactly what they're going to do sometimes. I have an idea, but like that's a little better. That's a little better. Okay, I'm going to take this and maybe go back to Gaussian blur. So it's not so harsh. Maybe like that. Yeah, maybe like that. And then I might come back here and throw it back a little bit. A little more dramatic. Now, here's something I want to go over today, okay? You have, because these are very simple. You have up here, let's put some type in here. Let's switch it to a simpler font. Like these typefaces I have, these are out of a collection I got for all the work I do for my girlfriend's restaurant. It's a really nice typeface set, okay? Gastropub, Wheat. There's a script in there called Belfast. I think it's really nice. Okay, so let's say we got whatever, okay? I'm going to change this background, something. Just don't like having all that white. And up here, let's go to black. And I don't want to go to black. Right up here, under layer, you have layer style. Okay? Now, this is very simple. Okay? These are filters. So we're going to go, let's just start with an easy one. Let's go layer style. It's easy to remember because you're talking about layers and style, right? And it's under layer. Okay? I'm going to go to drop shadow. And it gives me this window. And you can see here's opacity. Number one, it's on a multiply layer. Here's your blend modes again. Okay. Now you might want to just take that up to normal. And it's fine. I don't usually, in here, unless I need it, I don't use it that much. But be careful of those because they're all over the place. And sometimes it'll do weird things and you don't need it. So always check that. Okay. Here's opacity. Here's the angle of the light. Okay, so upper left feels good. Then here's distance. So that's how far away it's falling from the letter or from the object, the type, whatever it is you're doing. The spread, there it is, right? Gets a little softer edged here. Size, softens it up or hardens it up. Does that make sense? So basically what you're looking at, and then this is just the contour of it, which is sort of you're looking at a side view of a contour. Okay, now on the drop shot, I don't even know why they have it on there. I never use it. You know, and it's basically, you know, these simple tools. Does that make sense? Now you can go into these sub menu things. I don't really use them. Layer, knocks out, drop shadow, things like that. But in general, these things are fairly straightforward. Like I can go layer, style, and let's go bevel and emboss. Let's go a little closer. And you can see it beveled it off. You see it? Now, same thing, look. Style, inner bevel, emboss, pillow emboss, which it'll look like if you put it on something, that'll look like it's actually pushed into it. Stroke, that doesn't do anything. I never understand that one. Outer bevel, that's sort of a standard one. And then again, here's the depth of your bevel. How far do you want to go with it? Soften. You know, like I've used this filter, like if I'm doing a toy design and there's something raised in the mold. Does that make sense? I mean, it could be anything, but I can make it look like it's just raised out of the plastic very quickly when I'm rendering the product. Okay. Same thing here. Here's contours. So it just gives you all these, you're looking at a side cutout of it. Okay. Now I don't know which one the default was. And then here's your light. So it's affecting both. It's affecting how it's affecting my bevel where the light is. I'm getting it bottom lit there, upper left there. Okay. And then, you know, you have these things, opacity, like how strong is your highlight? And again, it's on screen. It's fine. It's working fine. So whatever. I can knock that down so it's not so hard. And then the shadow, I can do the same thing. I don't like that dark, dark shadow, more like that. Does that make sense? Now, here's the thing with layer styles. Do not overdo them. Okay. Usually in Photoshop classes, man, everybody starts slapping all these things on everything they do, and it's really cheesy. It's just like the high or the lens flare thing we talked about. Okay. All these tools, especially the ones that are very simple, like very simple to manipulate, people tend to gravitate towards them. Okay. And again, it's learning to get your eye more sophisticated. I'm sure I did the same crap. And then now you look at that stuff now and you're like, oh my God, like it's so, they think it makes it look all pro and it actually makes it look super amateurish. Does that make sense? Hang on, I want to make sure I got my, why this thing jumps over here. I'm going to grab this. Hang on, gosh darn it. Oh. Okay. So that's another one. Let's see what else we got here. Here's another one that's interesting. So let's go outer glow. That's fine. It might not be giving me this because it's typed. Let's see. Let's put an object here. There it is. Okay, so see that little outer glow it gave it? Another thing you got to be careful with. It's a really good tool. All these are great tools, but you just got to use them right, okay? And then again, opacity. So I'm going to really push the opacity. It's on screen for whatever reason. I'm going to put it. So look how much different screen is. I actually like screen better. Where'd it go? There it is. The other thing's a little too much. Opacity, I could pull it down a little bit. Spread. Look how hard edge it gets when I go out there. But if I go here and then go size, I can soften it up a little bit. So I don't want it that hard edged. Technique softer, precise. I don't like precise. A contour, I don't know how the contour relates to this. Then you can pull it back a little there. So on and so forth. Does that make sense? So they're very simple tools. You just sort of go in and dial in, okay? I don't want to go over these yet, but like pattern overlay and all that, I don't want to go over that yet. But the basic ones we just covered. Now, if you notice, it didn't want to give me the glow option on my type. Did you notice that? Because remember we talked about that. There's sometimes when type is live, Photoshop's like, I don't dick with it. There's certain things it won't do. I don't know why. So let's see if we go type, right click, rasterize type. And then let's see if layer style, outer glow. See, now it lets me do it. Okay. Okay. So if you're doing something with type and something won't happen to it, you might have to rasterize it. Okay. Type, I don't get that worried about. I'll usually make a copy of it, turn one off, and use the other one. Does that make sense? But type, I'm not as worried about because I'm like, okay, I know that's Parlor. I know it's this big, blah, 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 whatever. So let's go back over here. Does that all make sense? Now I'm trying to get this guy a little more dramatic. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to go layer style, outer glow. But I'm going to go, there should be, where is it? There should be a, they should give me an option for my eyedropper tool, and I know it's in here. I'm not seeing it. Hang on. So let's just do this. Let's go. It's weird it's not giving me that option. Hang on. Super weird. Okay, we'll have to dial it in then. Oops, wait. I want to just dial this in. There's a thing in here, and I don't know why I'm not finding it. I'll find it. That's a little better.
Mike, I think when you have the window open like you have it now, you can go over to the picture and you can automatically have an eyedropper.
It's not doing it though. See it?
Oh, no. Open it up again. You close the window. The color picker thing that you were just in.
Oh, let's see.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And then
you're
now,
right. Perfect.
there we go. Yeah.
Let's go a little deeper. I don't like that. I'm going to give him more like he's backlit, really heavily backlit. And then I'm just going to come up here and go pull it down a little bit. I'd probably dial it in a little more. It's a little too prominent. More like that. You know, and then I might start going, well, what can I do with okay, so remember what Casey just said. You got to open up the color picker window. When you go over it, it automatically shows up. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm going to just try something here, which I have no idea if it'll work. It probably won't. I want to get a cool in there somewhere. And I'm going to deaden it. I don't know exactly how yet. That's not too bad. So I'm going to go. I kind of like that just little tiny bit of cool in it. Okay. And it comes, to be honest, the way my brain's working, if you look at leather and things like that, there's cools in it. Okay. So I'm just looking at all this and going, yeah, it's kind of leathery idea. I can get some little bit of cool shadows in there. Okay. And then I might come in here and like still light them a little bit and then figure out, you know, what the next elements are going to be. And that's just sort of how I start popping everything together. Does that make sense? And by the way, I don't care when I'm doing this kind of thing. If it's a ratty ass selection, I don't care, because it's just for me to sort of start thinking about what I want to do. Does that make sense? And then I try not to spend more than, I mean, you guys are new to it, I get it, but I try to not spend more than about 10, 15 minutes on them. You know what I mean? And I'll do 1 or 2, 3 of these. What usually happens is I end up going totally down a rabbit hole. Does that make sense?
So Mike, would you play with more like how we said, if there were co-stars, would you put those
Mhm.
elements like the little circle heads and maybe like a tagline
Absolutely.
code at the bottom
Yeah.
and then kind
I
of.
might, yeah, I might come in here
videos.
and go, maybe there's, you know, I don't know where I'd put it. Or maybe there's like, you see this all the time. Let's see. See if I can find a. Or no, let's try this. It's a really cheesy picture, but wait, let me see if it's big enough. Maybe it's this guy. This looks stupid. Nah, I don't like that. Yeah. I'd get some bad guy back here. And again, I don't really care about the selection that much yet. I will later. And now this guy would have to probably change a little bit, but this is going to pixelate, but that's okay. You know, a lot of times they'll put this, whoever, his nemesis, whatever, behind him in the sky. Do you know what I'm talking about? They do this all the time. And again, we'll try and integrate him in there somehow. And this guy would actually, at this point now, would get a little lower, and then I'd have this big villain or whoever it is. Could be a horse. It could be all kinds of things. Sort of looming in there. Do you know what I mean? Or they could be to the side or whatever. Oops, where'd he go? I don't like that overlay. Hang on. A lot of times they'll do this. Hang on. I'm trying to find a decent overlay. I'll just use that for now. I'm going to desaturate that a little bit. It's overly saturated. And by the way, now my composition doesn't work because I got to make this guy where I can see both of them. Okay. What happened here? There it is. I want to see if I can desaturate him a little. It's a little better. And then maybe more like that. And I might find some ways, you know, I could integrate him more into the clouds a little bit. Did you get the point? Does that make sense? What else? You know, now I'm looking at it and I go, okay, that maybe that's an idea. Okay. I don't like this guy's feet cut off. So this would have to, so maybe this becomes, you know, the other group of actors. It's going to be my ghosted things over here. And now I'd have to make it, now I'd have to dial him in a little more prominent. Does that make sense? He's got to be more prominent. I'm going to try something here. I've never done this. This probably won't work. So what I just did is I put a gradient of white behind him, so he sticks out a little more. So I just sort of opaqued him out behind it a little bit. Now I could come into this layer, the one I just did, wherever it is. The hell layer is it? Oh, I think it's right here. Yeah. And I could go, you know, maybe pull that back a little and just get him dialed in more where I want, more like that. Does that make sense? So he's not completely transparent. And then I would probably lock the, let's say I go, let's say I like that. I'm going to lose it. Let's go. What I would do probably, because he's going all the way down here, is I would do my layer mask, gradient, black to white, and I do that, fade him off so he just fades out nicely. Does that make sense? Because I don't want him just to end there all weird. Oops. Oh, that's kind of cool. It was an accident. But anyway, you know, and then I start dialing things in. Now, I might be able to make this work if I had another person, you know, and they could be over here, maybe, right? A different character or whatever. Or maybe a horse. Or I could have over here, I don't know, maybe a cluster or something running towards the view. It's a little too tight on the sides, but it's one idea. Does that make sense? Questions?
Do they have a program in Photoshop that has like construction lines where you could put like a grid over it or anything?
Yeah, I think so. I never use it. Hang on.
Or do you ever use something like that?
I never do.
The guides.
Yeah, well, you can do guides. I mean, if you want to grab guides, you can just go and set up guides. Oops. I do use that. Okay. I just don't use a grid, but I think there is a grid in here. I'll have to find it. It should be.
I just used it the other day. If you go to new
Is it
guide
under
layout,
view? It's view?
yeah, new guide layout.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go.
And then you can like go into like settings for it, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, some people love working with grids. You know what? I'll look at that a little more so I can talk about it. I just never use that. I use regular grid or regular guides. Another thing, by the way, if you're using guides that I do, gosh, damn it, what's going on here? Oh, it brought the window up here. So let's go view. What was it? New guides? New guide layout. It gave me this window over here. So I'm assuming that's where you dial it in. Yeah, here's your number of columns, width, all that stuff. So that's where you go into to play around with it. So I could put 10 columns, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Where'd you go? Okay, I don't know.
Thank you.
Oops. But what I do is I usually make a new layer because I don't like those there all the time. And I go guide. And then let's say I go, you know, I want one there. And usually I'm just lining things up and stuff like that, or because I don't really design off grids. It's just not my thing. Nothing wrong with it. And then I have it on this layer up here so I can just turn that layer off. That's weird. Why isn't it doing it? Hang on, make sure I did it on the right layer. I should be able to turn that off. That's weird. Don't want extras. There it goes. That should let me turn that off. That's really weird. I'll figure that out because I do that all the time. I usually put it on its own layer and I can just turn it off when I don't want it. Because to me, it's distracting. Does that make sense? And then right here, clear guides. You can just clear them. It's really weird. Why is that doing that? That's really weird. Oh, well, I'll figure it out. But anyway, that's how I start comping, right? All I want tomorrow are thumbnails. Okay. And this comping process, like if you figure it out and everything, again, don't spend a lot of time on it. You just want to rip through them real fast. If it's a lousy selection with a bunch of fringe, who cares? It's just for your own eyes. That's it. Does that make sense? It's just to see, like, to play and then kind of go, okay. And then also, once I get to this phase, there's a point where I start kind of starting going down the rabbit hole, something's starting to really work. Then I might start my final because I don't want to keep going down the rabbit hole and then have to recreate the whole thing. If I'm kind of on fire and everything's working, I'll start working on the final. Does that make sense? I don't want to spend too much time on this where all my mojo gets blown out on this. I want to keep some of that for the final, the good stuff, right? And again, so much of the stuff you can just reverse and change and all that stuff that it's, you know, all I'm doing here is just trying to get some ideas. You know what I mean? And I like to play around a lot with the lighting and the, another thing down here, by the way. Let's see if I can do this with the, I don't know if I can do this with the stamp tool. So I got sample, current, and below. Yeah, so current and below. Let's see if we can do this. Yeah. So I'm going to take some of this and kind of clone stamp it on the layer above so his feet aren't just hard edged. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah, so he blends into the background.
Yeah, because he's not just going to be, you're not going to see the bottom of his shoes in this kind of environment. It's weird. It won't pick that up. It's weird. It's not. Oh, let's try this. I'm picking up my light values, which is weird. And over here it is. So I'd have to dial that in. So for some reason it's picking up my dark value, which is weird. It would normally, oh, it's on darken. See that? There we go. So it was on dark and that was the problem. And I get it dialed in better than this. And then look at, there's a repeat shape right there. I don't want that. So I want to go, you know, because then he doesn't feel like he's, now he feels more like he's standing in the environment. Okay. Again, we're trying to avoid these like cut out things, right? And I might even like up here. Is that a 3D image? I think it is. I might come up here and go, there's a couple ways I could do this. One is I might go to my blur tool, if you guys remember that, which is specific to an area. I can paint with it. So it's a normal, strength's 100%. Let's get them on this layer. You know, and I might soften some of this stuff that's going back in space. Does that make sense? Like when you see a portrait, oil or whatever, you usually soften this back here, right? Otherwise it feels like it's cut out, okay? And then your eye, the way your eye sees is when you're looking at whatever, like a face, everything sort of does drop off. So you think of it as atmospheric perspective, but it's actually just like your visual range. Does that make sense? And we're trying to take advantage of that, how the eyes actually sees, okay? So I might come into the other thing I might do, and I'll talk more about this either later this week or next week. I use a lot of smudge tools. I love smudge tools. And I have a really good set I'm going to give you next week. So I might come in here and break it up in a little more painterly way because I like that better. I don't want it just blurry. And I'll kind of break that up a little bit. Just here and there where I think it makes sense. Like I want to pull some of this hair back over the background so it doesn't feel cut out. Does that all make sense? Okay. So I have all these different, and I'll talk about these probably next week, but I have all these different tools. What's this thing always doing? There we go. That I'll talk about a little more about next week, but a lot of, I'm going to give you a lot of brushes, but, and by the way, don't do what happens with classes. I give them like a lot of brushes. They go, oh, there's so many brushes in there. I don't know how I'm going to go through. It's like, really, I gave you too many brushes and you're complaining about it. You know what I mean? And these are all, not all of them, but a lot of them are reactive brushes. Okay. So yeah. And here's the thing, when I'm doing a digital painting or something like that, I'm probably only using 4 or 5 of them. I just go through and I find the ones I like. I create, and I'll talk about this next week. I create a folder of the brushes I'm using for that particular job, plus my favorites, and that's it. Does that make sense? So like some of these, if you go in here, like this one, looking for the ones that I'm looking for. That's not what I want. Hang on. Oh, these are the wrong ones. Hang on. Oh, here we go. Let's go here. Oh, here. Let's pick a nice color. These things will give me really nice paint textures. Like this one's watercolor. Does that make sense? And then when I combine that, and again, I like to give you guys a heads up. Okay, so next week we'll probably get into this.
Excuse me, Mike. Are you tapping there, or are you?
I'm just painting.
You're just painting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, and then what I can do is I can come in here if I want to go further with it. I can come in here to some of my smudge tools. And the reason I like smudge tools is they emulate the way I paint. Okay. When you're painting, you're thinking about edges and things like that. So what I would normally do with, like, I take maybe a damp brush or a dry brush, and let's say it's oil, and I might have 2 edges, and I go whoop right between them, and I soften that edge. Does that make sense? Or I might drag it really dry over it and break the edge. I'm really concerned with how I handle edges, right? Which is just typical in painting. But I can come in here and start to control how I break up these edges. Now, the other thing that's nice about this is I can mix color this way. You see it? I'm not a big fan of always going in. Here's the problem with digital painters. So let's go back a minute. They're always going here, going, oh, I like that orange, and then sort of dicking with it, right? So they have no concept of how they mix that color. And it's also, for me, it's hard to get those really subtle transitions of color. I just like mixing them. Like I feel like I'm painting. Does that make sense? So it gives me another way to mix my color. So if I come in here, I could switch it up and I can go, let's do a more of a watercolor edge. They get slow when it's this big. And I can soften that edge just like a watercolor with a damp brush and wet watercolor. Does that make sense? So again, all this stuff is emulating the way I like to paint, okay? And by the way, that's why you need to learn how to paint, okay? Because if you come into the digital environment as a digital painter, you have no point of view as a painter because you don't know how to paint, okay? And by the way, that's not a knock on digital. It's a knock on the way people use digital. So this one, where is it? Pebbled blend gives me a real watercolory edge also. That's a really nice watercolor edge there. Just the way it's breaking up. Or gouache. Okay, so I can come in here and I can really manage my painting style. Does that make sense? I don't like, and this is just me, I don't like to use a lot of Photoshop jock trips to paint. Okay, not that I don't use them, because I'll go into the painting, I'll do all this stuff we're talking about, overlays and blends and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I want to be painting. Does that make sense? Because it's going to have much more of my personality in it. It's going to have much more interesting brushwork to look at. It's going to be just much more my point of view. And again, I'm just giving you a heads up what we'll do next week, okay? Much more point of view, and hang on a sec. And I always go back to this one, I think. Let me see if I have it. Yeah, no, that's not it. Where is it? It moved because I arranged my desktop. I'm more interested in this kind of digital painting. I probably showed you this before, but I think it's a great example of really nice digital painting done by somebody who clearly knows how to paint. Does that make sense? Really nice brushwork. Okay. And the thing, did we already talk about this?
We've seen this piece before.
Okay. But my thing with it is like, when you go in on these things, it's so finished and or just right. And this is just, my point of view. But when I zoom in on things, there's nothing there, man. It's all painterly. Does that make sense? And that's just something I really love. Okay. And I also know that this is what people tend to respond to, like in the industry, especially because it's like, they're like, holy shit, you know how to paint. You know what I mean? This is why everybody loves Craig Mullins so much. This dude, and it's all indication, right? There's nothing there. Okay. If you go up into his body up here, it's totally abstract. Okay. And abstraction's a big thing. I don't care if it's design. I don't care if it's painting. You need to think abstractly sometimes. Yeah. And just look at your shapes. Okay.
So are you saying they didn't just take an object and blur it out or something?
He's painting. He's using paint tools, probably very similar. It's probably pretty similar to the way I paint. Okay. Which is just painting. I just paint more or less. Okay. Now you have these other tools in there that you can obviously it speeds things up. I could try different things with it. I can throw it into different color schemes. I can do all these different things very quickly, which is why everything's digital now, right? But what I'm saying is, if you don't know the fundamentals of things, none of this stuff matters. Okay. It just doesn't matter. You got to know how to use this stuff. Okay. And from a fundamental perspective, whether that's fundamental design, fundamental painting, fundamental whatever, drawing, all that stuff. Does that make sense? What I'm saying is this whole thing's a holistic thing. What is happening with a lot of students is they're very digital fixated. Okay. Which I don't understand. And I think it's because they're just enamored with digital technology, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of them come out of game culture and they just think it's an extension of that. Does that make sense? When I think I've said this in here, when I see people and they go, Tom Baxter, digital artist, I go, why would you say that? You know what I mean? What does that mean? Like, that's all you do is digital? Because I'm not interested. You know what I mean? Because that scares me, that term. Does that make sense? Just say designer, illustrator, designer, whatever. Designer for me covers everything. Does that make sense? An illustrator is a designer, graphic designer is a designer, fashion designer is a designer, you're a designer. Okay, so anyway, what I'm saying is we'll start talking about this sort of thing probably next week. We're going to start talking about brushes next week, okay? And then I'll give you all my brushes and all my smudge tool set, okay? It just gives you much more, to me, it gives you much more flexibility over your painting environment, okay? I want a personal mark of my hand in there like I am when I'm painting, right? And, you guys probably are seeing this. There's a lot of stuff you see, especially in entertainment design, that's very formulaic, right? It's really formulaic. But then sometimes you go to these top people in the industry, guys like this, Peter DeSev, Carter Goodrich, they don't draw like entertainment design people at all. They don't draw like animators at all because they're not. They've got completely their own style. That's just, they're amazing, right? and they're the top flight people in the industry. So I look at that and I go, if you're following this sort of very hardcore, the way they teach entertainment design in most colleges, if you're following that path, you're going to be a clone. Okay. Because they're teaching 100% entertainment design, a lot of digital stuff, and not a lot of fundamentals and just good, solid design and painting. Does that make sense? So you've got to sort of plug that in there as a student. You got to make sure that you're getting that. Okay. And again, make sure that you're looking like, I think it's really good to take a really good oil painting class. Make sure it's a really good one, right? Does that make sense? Because I can guarantee you when you guys go out and do that stuff, when you go into the digital, if you get really good at painting, especially plein air painting, because that's way harder, but you get good at that stuff where you're out painting all the time, out drawing all the time. When you go to digital environment and painting, it's like, this is easy. You know what I mean? Painting is hard, way harder than this. Does that make sense? You know, and everybody thinks you're a rock star and it says, I know how to paint, man. That's all, you know? Okay. Any questions on any of this?
No questions.
I don't know why I didn't know this guy was 3D. It's just kind of weird. I'd also probably go in here and sort of, now that I did this little cool hit right here, I might go in and sort of hit a few spots because I kind of like that, right? And again, it's just based on looking at leather, because leather goes a little yellow ochre sometimes, it goes a little purpley sometimes, and it goes into that brown orange range. I can play around with that a little bit. I want to keep it pretty monochromatic, but my problem right now is I've got a completely warm environment. And I want to find a way to introduce some cool. Does that make sense? You know, I want to break that up a little bit. So I have to find some way of doing that. Let me try one more thing. I'll go back to my poi bowl. Get out of this. This should be behind him. So I might go in here and try and figure out how I can introduce a little bit of cool in there. And then this type should be in front. But behind him. And I like it with a little more cool in it. Does that make sense? Because I don't want the whole thing to be one thing. I want to make the color a little more complex. Does that make sense?
Would you put some of that color into him as well, like
Yeah.
on the bottom up?
Yeah, I might even go in here and just go on another layer and go, okay, what's this layer on? This right now is darkened. So let's take another layer, and I'm going to just take a brush. I don't know if this one particular brush will work, but I might just try and come in here and go, let's see if I can go back on darken again. Maybe that's not the right. Let's try a different overlay. So let's try a different overlay. And now I might start painting some of that in. That's not too bad. Oops. It's a little punchy right there, but I think I can fix that in a minute. Because I want this to be subtle. It's not going to be, because I don't have a light source to explain this. You know, I could probably create one, but at least if I introduce a little purple into the environment, a little cool, I have an excuse to cool him down a little bit. Does that make sense?
So
now
you
I
would,
might just put it in all the shadows maybe.
okay.
And it wouldn't be this screaming, by the way. I'm going to switch it. Hang on. And then I'm going to take this. I'm going to smudge this out a little bit. It's too hard edged. And then I'm going to go right back to here again and see if I can go. find a little, like that's really subtle right there, hue. That's kind of cool. So far I like hue because it's really subtle, but I can get a little cool in there. There it is. You can see how subtle that is, right? If you can even see it on your screen, it's really subtle. Okay, so then I go, okay, maybe I can paint a little this like in here. Let's see if it'll work here. So I'd have to knock that down, but I could probably get some in the shadows up here. That's still too strong. So I'm going to come in here and go get my sponge tool again. Put it on desaturate. And knock it down a little bit so it's not so strong. And maybe just have a little hint of cool in the shadow. Oop, now it's gone too far. And I might even put that on a different layer so I could dial it down. Does that make sense? Like maybe take this, put it on this layer. Maybe it's not a cool shadow. Maybe it's just a shadow value. You know, whenever they have that bridge over or that brim over their thing, I like to use a shadow value here to lock the top of the face to the hat. Does that make sense? Okay. So, you know, I just start going down the rabbit hole. I like that little hint of purple in there. I'd probably dial it in more. I don't want it to stick out too much, but it's starting to put him, even though we made him sort of monochromatically in the environment, I can introduce a little cool, but I introduce cool into the environment also in a very subtle way. And you can see it just starts to sophisticate up the color a little bit. Does that make sense? Other than just being this one idea or the other idea. I'm a big believer in modulating color. In this case, modulating color. Does that make sense? Like really controlling where my temperatures shift a little bit. That will sophisticate up your work a lot, okay? And your painting, okay? If you're blocking everything with one value or one temperature and then going, okay, here's a darker version of the temperature, and you sort of leave it there, it's not going to be nearly as alive as if I modulate the colors. Temperatures, very subtly, sometimes not so subtly, it makes a huge difference. Does that make sense?
So like in the camera, the first one when we did the camera, kind of like doing the lenses, that kind of like fine finesse work, and then you're taking the color a little bit from the background to kind of make that overall. So this is like the final finish works is where you're going on this.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going, what I'm really doing here is I'm just trying now, before I got to this point, I would have already jumped into, you know, as soon as I got the composition right, I would have gone, I like all this stuff. I would have probably started working on the final. I just would have to figure out how the other characters fit in there maybe. And maybe I get a different picture and there's a different pose where I can put them in a more interesting way, you know, a very dynamic kind of thing or something like that. I'm using this because I had this image, but, and it could work. But again, what I'm trying to do here now is start to introduce a little more complex color. Temperature, it's really temperature. Does that make sense? Casey?
Yes.
And it's the same thing with your painting. You got to do the same thing with painting, right? So I'm just pulling all this out of painting, really, is what I'm doing. Okay. Which is, and again, I know I harp on this all the time. You want to learn color? Go plein air painting. Does that make sense?
Actually, I wanted to ask you some questions about the plein air painting. Because I'm not able to participate because I live far away. I'm also on the Discord server with everyone else who's taking it. And so I saw you're starting them out with black and white. Yeah. And then moving into color. Yeah.
So what's a question?
The question was like, yeah, you just recommend starting with black and white to get comfortable with the medium.
For two reasons. Eventually I'll have this stuff up on my YouTube channel. Okay. I'll probably already do some of it. Yeah, and it's for more reasons than what people usually think. They think it's like, oh, to learn the value thing, and that is part of it. But it's actually whatever paint medium you're using, and a lot of them using gouache, which is a tricky medium. And a lot of it is to go, okay, if we're only concentrating on value, okay, there's two things I actually want to do. I want to concentrate on value, but I also want to concentrate on paint handling, just getting used to how the paint works. And now we're not worrying about color and all these things, which is too overwhelming. If I go, let's start understanding how this paint works, value, color, temperature, all that stuff, it's going to be overwhelming, right? But if you step into it, right? So what I ask them to do, and we did this on location, is I go, here, I might go to a dry brush thing here with fatter paint and drag it down and get dry brushed edges. It's the same thing we're talking about with this kind of thing. I'm going to go over here. I've started washy and loose. Now I'm going to build up my paint a little bit. What's going to happen, I'm going to start building, and you start to get an understanding of how the paint breaks up, how it handles without worrying about all this stuff. You know what I mean? Also, I'm trying to break them of the habit that they get in entertainment classes where they go, oh, black in the foreground, 50% gray, 30% gray. Okay, now I got atmosphere. And it's like, okay, that's fine if you're just doing a big idea, but that ain't painting, right?
Mike, are you having them mix their own black as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, now when we do the black and white thing, I just let them use black and white.
Oh, okay. So you don't have them do like
get out of black and white, which we are, and into color, no more black.
Okay.
No
So like
umber, no Payne's gray, none of those crutch colors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We're mixing color to color because you want to have vibrant color. Okay. And then, massing by temperature and color and temperature. Right now, what we're doing is massing by color and temperature now. Okay. And the other thing is to break them of the habit of going, oh, that tree in the foreground, and they go in with black. And it's like, that tree is not black. Does that make sense? It's like there's subtlety in that tree and it's not even close to black. Okay. It's getting bounced light off the ground. You're not even looking at it because you've learned these formulas and you just plug the formula into it. And it's like, you're not looking. And that's the main thing you got to learn with plein air paint or any kind of observational work. You got to look because it's the purest, cleanest way you can observe all these things. Does that make sense? Because photographs lie like crazy. Okay. They're great tools, but if you don't work from observation, you don't know how to use photography. Does that make sense? You do not know how to use it. You're going to copy photography and that doesn't work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're all killing it in that thing though.
I've seen it. Their stuff looks really good.
I know. And it's crazy to me. Like Josh, there's this guy, Josh, you probably don't. He is like everything I give this guy. And I'm pretty sure he just came in sort of cold. He was in bands and stuff like that. And he did one this week. And I go, holy shit, man. Like when I first did plein air, it was a disaster. And like, I don't see really anybody there who their work looks like a disaster. They're all like jumping very fast. It's mind blowing to me. You know what I mean? It's really cool. But that's where all this temperature shifting and all this kind of stuff comes from, is from that. Does that make sense? And what I love about that is if you're, you could be a graphic designer and do this. You don't have to be great at it. It's the learning. It's the information you get from it. And then you can bring that into like this when you're talking about design, and you can bring another layer of color understanding into it and all these other things, edges, painterly ideas, like you're bringing all that information into whatever, right? But you're going to have so much more of an advantage than people who don't do that. Okay. And there's so many like graphic design programs and things. They're teaching software. They're not teaching design. Does that make sense? You got to be careful with that. Okay. Because there's again, when I was learning Photoshop, it was just learning not very well, but learning Photoshop with no design thinking in it at all. You know what I mean? And these tools, again, don't mean anything if you don't know how to put them together to make a compelling design. Does that make sense? And to me, design is a blanket umbrella term for any kind of illustration, entertainment design, graphic design, fashion design, UX, UI design, all of it. That's all design. Okay. To me, there's art. That's the big umbrella. Then there's design, and everything falls under that. Okay. Because to me, if you don't start off thinking like an artist, why are you doing it? Does that make sense? And it really irritates me too, by the way, because the fine art people always go, oh, that's commercial art. It's like, you don't know shit. Okay. You don't understand all the artistry that goes into this, all the skill that you don't have, by the way, which is why you're pissing on it. All that stuff that goes into that. And don't tell me there's not artistry in entertainment design or graphic design, or go look at Sagmeister and tell me there's no art in that, or Paula Scher or any of those kind of people. All these disciplines start with an artistic point of view. Does that make sense? And by the way, I like the collaborative process. That's why I was always a painter, because I could go home. That's my painting. It's all mine, right? But when I was at work, I like the parameters. I like the collaboration. You know, and I complain about marketing people, but most of the time I was collaborating with people who were super interesting and fun. And it was fun. It was like being a kid in a sandbox and somebody's got a better idea and makes your idea better. And then you're like, hey, let's do this. And the cool thing about it is you're going, it's just like being a kid, except you're like, they're actually going to make this. And Disney's going to put it somewhere out in the world, you know? And it's like when you're a kid, you're just working in this vacuum, pretending you're doing all that. It's just really interesting when all of a sudden you're like, this is actually going to happen. It's actually going to get made, or they're going to build it or whatever. And it's just this really interesting, fun, collaborative process. And I'd argue, and I get it, some people don't want to do that. I get that. And that's fine. They want to just do their own thing, and that's fine. But I think there's something really interesting and challenging about being given a set of parameters. And this thing has to exist in the real world, however it has to exist, you know, whether it's a theme park attraction or a movie or a product or whatever. I think that's super, because I always was like that when I was a kid. I loved commercial art. Does that make sense? I mean, I love fine art and all that too, but I love product design. I love product design. Just everything. I like design. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm always harping on you guys to go out and look at a lot of things are open now. By the way, I'm going to take a road trip, and I would have done it already, but I have that Saturday class. Do you guys know about the Hagen Museum? I think it's Hagen or Hagen. It looks like Hagen to me. In all places, it's in Stockton. Okay. And I found out about it a long time ago. They've got Jerome's there. They've got Leindeckers there. They've got just a bunch of amazing like illustrators and actually total treasure trove there, man. I'm going to take a road trip out there. It's like 6.5 hours away. It's like an ag country. Like how these paintings ended up there, I have no idea. But it looks like an amazing museum. And now it's open again. I'm driving out there. I would do it. I would have done it already, but I had my Saturday class. So that's my 3-day stretch where I could have done it. But anyway, it's not that far, 6.5 hours. If you want to see really amazing, if when you get the chance to see something like a Leindecker or a Maxfield Parrish or a Rockwell or a Cody Whitmore, or I mean, a million of them, right? Or Jerome, and get to see those things from life, it is a totally different experience. You will learn so much from it. Does that make sense? You will learn so much from that, especially Leindecker, man. When you go look at Leindecker, number one, he's a mind blower, period, anyway. But when you see his actual work, it's like that guy was a monster at everything. You know what I mean? And I don't think he gets enough credit for what a good graphic designer he was. Okay. When you look at his paintings in person, you really realize like, holy shit, this guy's an amazing draftsman, an amazing painter, an amazing illustrator, an amazing graphic designer, and an amazing hand type painter. Does that make sense? Because you had to have that skill set back then, but that guy was nuts. Okay. And if you can get, and by the way, you don't get until the Lucas Museum opens, which isn't going to be for another, I don't know, a year maybe. That's going to be a massive illustration museum. But until you get that, museums don't normally carry illustrators' work because they don't see them as having value. They just go, it's a commercial thing. And, you know, I think that's changed a lot. Where people are realizing guys like Rockwell were almost like genre painters. So, does that make sense? But anyway, and also there's a Rockwell at the Lincoln Shrine in Redlands. Have I told you guys that? There's a big significant Rockwell at the Lincoln Shrine in Redlands, right? Which is this little tiny building. It's dedicated to Lincoln. They also, the dome of it, it's a little building, but it's got a dome. That's a Dean Cornwell painted that dome. Okay. And if you don't know who he is, he's a monster Golden Age illustrator. So they've got a Rockwell piece over there. They've got the ceilings painted by Cornwell. You walk out of that to the back of the museum, which is like 20 feet. They got a rare, I think it's like a rare book room. You knock on the door and you go, hey, we want to see the painting. They've got a big giant Dean Cornwell canvas in there that was his color comp for a mural he did at the LA Central Library.
Oh.
And his comp is like 10 feet long.
Okay. What's that third museum you just said? Not the Lucas, the one you're just talking about it.
Lincoln Shrine.
Lincoln Shrine.
It's in Redlands.
Redlands.
And then there's a library right in front of it. You got to go into I think it's a rare book room or something like that. It's in the back. Like you walk out of Lincoln Shrine, you walk in the back of the library and you have to knock on the door. And they have that there. And then they have, I don't know, it's just crazy. Okay. I had a student tell me about it and I go, there's no Rockwell over there. I know about it. And he goes, yeah, there is. And I go, no, there isn't. I know about it. And then he goes, meet me over at the blah, blah, blah. And I met him over there and I go, holy crap. And it's a significant Rockwell. It's a big one. You know what I mean? Like if you guys got to go see those things from life, because it is a completely different thing. You'll really see how much transparency he used. The economy of brushwork, how simple everything is actually. It's just when you put it all together visually, it looks very complex, but it's actually fairly simplified. Does that make sense? Which is something you guys all have to learn. I don't care what kind of design discipline, you have to learn simplicity, massing, staging, all that stuff. Does that make sense? I know I go on these tears, but I think it's important. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, so tomorrow I'm going to get thumbnails, correct? At least, I'd say at least 3. I mean, if it was me, I'd do as many as I need to do. Yeah. And I'll get caught up today and tomorrow on everything, because I don't think I have to go anywhere this week. And that's it, you guys. I'll talk to you in the morning. Yeah. Again, I'll try and get this video up a little quicker. If my computer's still doing what it's doing, I'll try and switch over to the other one. Yeah. I think I have Premiere on that, hopefully, because this computer, I don't know what's going on. I haven't been able to troubleshoot it. It's just dead. I mean, as far as the Premiere goes, it's just dead. And I don't know what's going on. It's not moving. I've tried everything that I know with it. It's just super weird because it usually doesn't take me very long to edit these. It's just the time exporting and rendering is all it takes any time. But anyway, if I do it on my other one, it should be faster. It should be back to normal, hopefully. Yeah?
Right on. Thank you,
No
Mike.
questions, right?
No.
Okay, guys. Get to work.
Thank you, Mike. See you
I'll see you
tomorrow.
guys in the morning.